What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. We have ourselves quite a bit of volleyball to talk about today, as we have not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 scheduled releases I'll be breaking down. And we also have a little Big 12 volleyball coaches poll to break down as well. Also, Megan Kraft continues to do her thing on the pro beach volleyball level. How does she do it? She's only 19 and she's still in college, and she is just killing it on the beach volleyball scene. Just amazing. And speaking of beach volleyball, we have the Denver Open, the AVP's next event, as the AVP will be heading down to the Rocky Mountains, where they will be going to Denver, Colorado, for the next AVP event. All that and more here on Set Point. So hand me a volleyball. Set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. I hope you all are having a great Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday, whatever you are listening from, what time you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way to Set Point. And without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball goodness. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsor. IE Sports Radio is proud to call the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California _Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, then California, then Warriors. IE Sports Radio, the platform you are listening on, is available on Twitter at IE Sports Radio and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. And they just launched a TikTok account at IE Sports Radio. And you can also follow IE Sports Radio on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then sports, then radio. They also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com. And when you go there, you will see a Patreon link at the top. And when you click it, you will find that payments start out at $5 a month. And this will get you a shot from all 28 of our shows, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on IE Sports Radio's segment of The Defining Moment, the flagship show of said IE Sports Radio with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. In addition, IE Sports Radio has been building shows dedicated to certain sports and has interviewed coaches and other authorized media personnel as well. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. With your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you, everyone, for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Shout out to our 4 Patreon supporters: Bay Area Raised Apparel, Marcus Losgreat, Key to the Gate, and an anonymous supporter. Also, we have to give a shout out to IE Sports Radio's Fan of the Month, Justin Ekstrom, a Minnesota Vikings fan hailing from the Great Lakes of Minnesota. And also, we have to give a shout out to everyone that made IE Sports Radio's 8th year anniversary super special. Here's to more anniversaries and celebrations to come. Now, without any further delay, let's get on into this volleyball goodness. So we'll start off with the schedule releases because we got 5 of them things. At first, it was looking like I was only going to do 3, just because I basically chose 3, and I thought 3 should be enough. But then I saw the schedule release of 2 big-time teams, and I'm like, I got to throw these 2 in there, and I don't want to cut anything. So this schedule actually was released well long ago, all the way back in late May. Yeah, May 23rd, 2022. So this schedule release was released back on May 23rd. This was actually Creighton's schedule. I don't know if I went over Creighton's schedule, but I highly doubt I did. So here's Creighton's schedule for the 2022 season. They open up the season in the Rumble of the Rockies tournament in Wyoming as Creighton plays Iowa State, which should be a good little test. Later on in the day, Creighton plays Wichita State, and then the day after, Creighton plays host Wyoming. Then Creighton hosts the Blue Jay Invitational as they will play USC on Friday, September 2nd, and then they will also play Kentucky on September 3rd, the day after, and then they also play Northern Iowa. I should also make note that Kentucky is also playing USC, so USC, while they haven't released their schedule, has a little bit of a leak in their schedule, as I also went over Kentucky's schedule a while back, but USC's schedule should be released momentarily. Then Creighton plays Nebraska in an interstate rivalry game, as Creighton will be playing that game on its home floor in the Chi Health Center in Omaha, Nebraska. The last time these two teams played, it was at the Chi Health Center, and it was overflooded with Nebraska fans. I feel bad for Creighton and its fan base, but Nebraska really travels well. Also, its time was changed, so it'll be at 5 p.m. I want to say it's Central Time. I'm not familiar with the Nebraska time zone, just because I'm a California person. Either way, it is going to be featured on FS1. I don't know if it's going to be televised nationally, but if it is, awesome sauce. Then Creighton will be remaining at home on September 9th when they play Florida State. That Florida State matchup is going to be very good. I think that matchup is going to be very interesting right there, just because Florida State does return a good chunk of its team, and Florida State does look promising this year. And then the day after, Creighton will remain in Omaha, but they will be heading to Omaha to take on the University of Omaha. So it'll be in Baxter Arena. So I should make note that the Florida State matchup will be played at Baxter Arena, which is the home of Omaha and not the home of Creighton. So closing out non-conference play, Creighton has the Rice Adidas Invitational, as Creighton will be heading down to the Big H, Houston, Texas, for that, as they will be playing Kansas State on Saturday, September 17th, and then on Sunday, September 18th, Creighton will be playing at Rice. Then Creighton opens up Big East Conference play, as they have Georgetown at home on September 23rd, and they also have Villanova on Sunday, September 25th. Then on Wednesday, September 28th, they are home against Xavier. And then on September 30th, a Friday, they are home against Butler. So they have 4 games at home, which is quite interesting. Now, here's something to realize. Creighton actually plays part of their games at the Wayne and Eileen Ryan Athletic Center and DJ Sokol Arena. So basically, it's not going to be at the Chi Health Center, which is where they're going to play Nebraska as well none of their other opponents. So they're just playing Nebraska at Chi Health Center, probably due to seating purposes, just because there might not be enough seating for everybody. So there's that right there. Back to Creighton's conference schedule. October 7th, Creighton hits the road to Connecticut to take on UConn, and then the day after, Creighton has to hop on a plane, and then they head up to play Providence, which, boy howdy, that's a quick turnaround. You go from Connecticut to Rhode Island in the span of less than 24 hours. Then Creighton returns home on Friday, October 14th when they play Marquette, their rival. That Marquette matchup is probably going to be big time right there, just because it's always down to Marquette and Creighton when it comes to the Big East. And then on Sunday, October 16th, Creighton will remain at home to play DePaul. Then on Friday, October 21st, Creighton hits the road to Pennsylvania to take on Villanova. And then they will remain on the road as they head to Washington, D.C. to take on Georgetown. Then on October 28th, Creighton will head down to New Jersey to take on Seton Hall. And then on October 30th, Creighton will head down to Queens, New York to take on St. John's. So for those that remember, or for those that did their homework, St. John's was actually one of the teams that beat Creighton in Big East Conference play. And honestly, I would not be surprised if St. John's is able to do that again. If anyone knows the other team, do put it in the comment section. And if you do, well, if you're in the live chat, but if you do know the other team that beat Creighton last year, do put that in the chat room. And then I'll give you a shout out. That's if you're listening on the live chat. But back to Creighton's Big East Conference schedule. Creighton then returns home to Omaha to take on Providence, and then they play Connecticut 2 days later. Then on November 11th, Veterans Day, Creighton plays St. John's, and then November 13th, they play Seton Hall. Then Creighton hits the road for its final two matches, starting with November 18th against DePaul, as they'll hit the road to the Windy City. And then Creighton will be closing out Big East Conference play against Marquette on November 19th. So, once again, it's another quick turnaround. So, Creighton has quite a bit of those. Speaking of the chat room, by the way, big shout out to the chat room. Adam Karnick, Davidson Crooks, and Gina G popping into the chat room. Adam says, "Good evening, Teran. Have a great show." And he says, "Ooh, beach volleyball talk. I love it." And then Davidson Crooks says, "What's good?" And then Gina says, "The best volleyball show on the planet. Have an amazing show, Teran." I appreciate it, Gina. So that is that for Creighton's schedule. You also have the Big East tournament. For me, the Big East tournament always boils down to Marquette and Creighton. I think both of those two teams are probably the best the non-Power 5 teams out there. I think they're two of the best non-Power 5 schools in NCAA women's volleyball. Others probably consist of BYU, San Diego, Pepperdine, Rice is always up there, Western Kentucky. That's just a few of my favorite my top non-Power 5 NCAA women's volleyball schools. But that's just me, though. So that is going to do it for Creighton's schedule. Now we jump on over to a personal favorite of mine, Long Beach State. Yes, Long Beach State's women's volleyball team has released its schedule for the 2022 season. Okay, it's not that impressive. It's not that special, but it is what it is. So, Long Beach State. Bear in mind, I will be at a majority of these matches, just because, first of all, Tyler Hildebrand is kind of a fan of this show, and he's already seeing some promise in the show. He already says he likes the show title, and he likes the volleyball podcast when I first met him, but I digress. Anyway, so Long Beach State opens up its season in Portland, Oregon, as they play in the Portland State Tournament. Long Beach State plays Oregon State on Friday, August 26th. And then later that day, Long Beach State hosts Portland State that same day. Then on August 27th, Long Beach State plays Oregon, which right out the gate, Long Beach State is playing two Pac-12 schools. While Oregon State isn't the best Pac-12 school, it's no easy feat to try to beat a Pac-12 school or any Power 5 school. So I like this start for Long Beach State. And then Long Beach State also plays Portland State last year, Long Beach State plays Portland State, which they played last year. Then Long Beach State returns home for its Long Beach State tournament, which is always a fun tournament, year in and year out. So Thursday, September 1st, Long Beach State plays Boise State. And then on Saturday, September 3rd, Long Beach State plays Notre Dame. The Notre Dame game was actually leaked on Notre Dame's schedule. So I am looking forward to seeing what Long Beach State can do against Notre Dame. They're obviously very familiar with Boise State just because they played them last year. I'm hoping I could still go to that Notre Dame game just because I still might have some games. I still might have some other things that might be coming up, but I really want to go to that Notre Dame Long Beach State match. Then, as we all know from last week, Long Beach State hits the road to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on Nebraska. So, like I mentioned last week, Long Beach State and Nebraska probably agreed to that match just because Tyler Hildebrand was a former assistant of Nebraska. So I think it's a great homecoming for Hildebrand. He obviously helped Nebraska win an NCAA championship, and he helped them reach the national championship last year, as well as getting close to the Elite Eight and the Final Four and whatnot. And then Long Beach State plays Loyola Marymount, or LMU, on Friday, September 16th, and then Saturday, September 17th. So it's basically a doubleheader, one at home, one on the road. And that concludes Long Beach State's non-conference schedule. For their conference schedule, Long Beach State opens up on the road against Cal Poly on September 23rd. Then the day after, Long Beach State plays at Cal State Bakersfield in Bakersfield. And then Long Beach State plays Cal State Fullerton at Fullerton on September 27th. So right out the gate, they have 3 road games. Their first home conference game will be Saturday, October 1st, when Long Beach State plays Hawaii. And then following that, October 7th, which is the Friday, Long Beach State will be playing UC Santa Barbara. My plan is to go to both those matchups, Hawaii and UC Santa Barbara. And then following the UC Santa Barbara match, Long Beach State plays CSUN or Cal State Northridge. Then on Friday, October 14th, Long Beach State hits the road to La Jolla to take on UC San Diego. Then they return home for a home bout against UC Irvine on October 15th. Long Beach State has a rare Thursday game as they play at UC Riverside on October 20th. Then 2 days after, Long Beach State plays at UC Davis to conclude its 2-game roadie. Then Long Beach State heads back home on October 28th to take on Cal State Bakersfield. And then on October 29th, Long Beach State will play host to Cal Poly, which I think that should be a barn burner right there. That could be a crucial matchup just because Cal Poly always has a good team. Well, not always, but they used to be one of the not-so-good teams, and now they've risen like the phoenix in the ashes, or from the ashes, as Cal Poly has a solid team overall. And then Long Beach State concludes its 3-game homestand on November 1st, a Tuesday, against Cal State Fullerton. Then Long Beach State has a 3-game road trip following that 3-game homestand, as November 4th, Long Beach State hits the road to the Big Island in Honolulu to take on Hawaii. Then a week after, Long Beach State plays at CSUN and follows that up with UC Santa Barbara. Then November 18th, Long Beach State plays UC San Diego at home. Then they follow that up with a match at UC Irvine in the Brand Event Center. And then Long Beach State closes out its regular season, with 2 home games, one being against UC Davis on November 25th, and then UC Riverside concludes the regular season for Long Beach State on November 26th. So, looking at the non-conference schedule, it's rather interesting. It's kind of challenging when you look at it. Like, Nebraska is obviously a very challenging opponent. Notre Dame, despite missing the postseason, I think might have been the best team to miss the postseason, debatably. Boise State always has a good team. Oregon is a good challenge for Long Beach State. Oregon State isn't too bad of a challenge. They're kind of in that mid-tier from the Pac-12. And then LMU isn't too bad hailing from the West Coast Conference. Like, LMU is kind of that 4th banana on that banana patch behind Pepperdine, San Diego, and BYU. So I think LMU twice in 2 days is going to be a challenge, right? Could be a good challenge right there. And I think it's a good non-conference schedule. And I think Long Beach State is going to be ready for that Big West Conference. I think there's some big things happening in the Tyler Hildebrand era. I really think Tyler Hildebrand is building a great culture, as he basically said it best. He said, this is going to be Volleyball University, and boy howdy, I'm excited to see what Hildebrand could do. I only wish that the Nebraska game was at Long Beach State, but I can't complain. I ain't going to complain, and I ain't going to cry about it. Because you look at the coaching staff that Tyler Hildebrand has, he has Kirsty LaRoe, who has a good little reputation. She actually coached at she was an assistant coach for UNLV, and then she worked closely with Mariana Hayden, who is the two-time AVCA and back-to-back Mountain West Player of the Year, which I think is quite nice, in my opinion. And then in Athletes Unlimited, a pro league, Kirsty LaRoe was able to basically recruit players for that indoor volleyball league. And then another assistant that Tyler Hildebrand has is Kim Hill, a former U.S. Olympian, who is now a full-time assistant coach, which is absolutely amazing. She was supposed to be a volunteer assistant coach, but now she is a full-time assistant coach, which was announced a couple weeks ago, which is quite nice. And I really think that this is a great thing for Long Beach State, having her as an assistant coach instead of a volunteer coach. She'll be around full time to help out Tyler Hildebrand, and I think this is going to be something special to watch out for if you're Long Beach State, if you're a Long Beach State fan. So that is that for Long Beach State's schedule. Now we jump on into the Power 5 schools. We'll start off with Utah, hailing from the Pac-12. So Utah kicks off its season in Salt Lake City for the Utah tournament. They play LMU and Kansas on the same day. So those are two challenging opponents. LMU kind of being a little underwhelming. LMU had themselves a great season in terms of overall wins. They just could not pull out that big-time win in West Coast Conference play. And then Kansas, we all know, they made it all the way to the Sweet 16, only to lose to Pitt. And my question is, will Kansas be as good as they were last year? Can they stack up to a perennially good Utah team? That remains to be seen. And then Utah closes out the Utah tournament when they play Utah Valley. So there is that right there. Then Utah hits the road to Lafayette for the Purdue tournament, as they play University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee on September 2nd, and then they follow that up with a matchup against Purdue, which, boy howdy, 2 matches in one day, and then you're getting Purdue, a team that made it all the way to the Elite Eight. That's kind of a interesting scheduling alignment for Utah right there. Then Utah hits the road. Well, they stay in Lafayette to conclude the Purdue tournament when they play Bradley. Then Utah hits the road to Southern California for the USD tournament, the University of San Diego tournament. They play SMU on September 9th, and they play UConn on September 10th, and then they have a second matchup against San Diego, the host school, that same day. So playing San Diego, obviously you're going to get a challenge, and the Jenny Craig Pavilion is quite a tough place to win at, and Utah is going to be out of its comfort zone just because, well, it's in California, and Utah kind of differs from California, but they already are going to be out of their comfort zone once they play in that Purdue tournament. So there's that. Then Utah has another Utah tournament as they play BYU, and then they play Utah State, which is kind of like an interstate like tournament right there, which I think it's good. I think it's good to have that little interstate rivalry between two teams. I wouldn't really call Utah State a actual rival, but I think it's still pretty good. I mean, it's always good to have that little interstate rivalry with Utah, with all the Utah schools. And then obviously the holy war with BYU is never disappointing. So that closes out Utah's non-conference schedule. Jumping over to their conference schedule, they open up conference play on September 22nd against Colorado. That's actually a Thursday, so I'm pretty sure every Pac-12 school opens up the conference play against their rival schools. Like Utah plays Colorado, Stanford plays Cal, USC plays UCLA, Arizona plays Arizona State, Washington plays Washington State. You get the point. And then Utah follows up their matchup against Colorado when they remain at home to take on Arizona. Then Utah hits the road to take on the SoCal schools, starting on September 30th, a Friday, when they play at UCLA. And then on October 2nd, Utah plays at USC. Then October 7th and October 9th, Utah will be heading back home to take on the NorCal schools. They'll be playing Cal and Stanford on Friday and Sunday, October 7th and 9th, respectively. And then Utah will remain at home to take on the Washington schools. October 14th, a Friday, Utah plays Washington, and then Utah plays Washington State on Sunday, October 16th. Then Utah hits the road to take on the Oregon schools as they head down to Eugene to play Oregon on October 21st, a Friday. And then on October 23rd, a Sunday, Utah heads up to Corvallis to take on Oregon State. Then Utah heads on the road, or back home, for the two-game homestand against the SoCal schools. First matchup is October 28th when they play USC on a Friday. And then on October 30th, Utah plays UCLA on a Sunday. Then Utah heads down to Northern California to take on the NorCal schools. November 4th, a Friday, Utah plays at Stanford. And then November 6th, a Sunday, Utah plays at Cal. And then Utah heads back home to take on the Oregon schools. Thursday, November 10th, Utah plays Oregon State. And then Sunday, November 13th, Utah plays Oregon. I'm guessing Utah playing Oregon State on Thursday instead of Friday is basically to honor Veterans Day. I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm not entirely sure why Utah isn't playing on a Friday, but I guess their school kind of prevents them from playing on like holidays or national holidays. Either way, that's how Utah's schedule is supposed to be built. Then Utah closes out the season with 4 road games, starting with the Washington schools on November 18th, a Friday, when they play at Washington State. Then on Sunday, November 20th, Utah plays at Washington. Then on Wednesday, November 23rd, Utah heads down to Tempe to take on Arizona State. Then Utah closes out the season on the road against its rival Colorado in Boulder. So that is that for Utah's schedule. So overall, Utah's schedule looks kind of challenging. I mean, LMU is decent, and Kansas is also decent. Yes, Kansas lost quite a few of key pieces to the transfer portal and graduation, but I think Kansas can still be a good matchup right there. Purdue is also going to be a tough challenge right there, just because it's very tough to win at Lafayette. And then Utah playing at San Diego, that's kind of going to test them on the road. And then Utah playing BYU is also going to be a big test. So overall, Utah kind of has its work cut out for them. Like, playing 4 NCAA tournament teams is nothing to sneeze at. So I look forward to seeing what Utah can bring to the table. They always have a great team, though. They are well coached, as I hope to pronounce this right. Beth Lanier. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Beth Lanier does a great job year in and year out. And I think Utah has what it takes to keep up with the Pac-12. We'll see, though. We'll see. So that is that for Utah's schedule. Now we jump on into Texas's schedule. And this was released today, and it's like, boy howdy, like, Jiminy Christmas. So Texas's schedule is quite interesting to say the least, as for starters, their first 4 games are going to be very tough, in my opinion. They first open up the season with not 1, but 2 games in Columbus, Ohio, when they take on the Ohio State on October 26th and 27th. Talk about a big way to open up the NCAA women's volleyball season if you're Texas. Playing Ohio State twice. That's crazy. And Ohio State is slated to be pretty good. Texas is also slated to be good with Logan Eggleston, the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year. But they did lose one key piece to the transfer portal. They lost Nalani Iosia, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, to the transfer portal. And I was just informed of this last week, and I was like, whoa, I did not know she transferred. As Iosia transferred to Michigan State of all teams. I was like, Michigan State? So, Texas is going to have a little bit of a new identity. However, taking the place of Nalani will be Zoe Fleck, who transferred from UCLA. So, I really think Texas won't have too many problems at the libero position. Gina G in the chat room says St. Mary's women's volleyball team dropped their schedule today, so I'll probably get into that next week, just for Gina, because she basically informed me of this. I don't want to go too much on schedule releases, just because, once again, I had 3 originally, and then I had to throw in Texas and another big-time team, so there's that. So, back to Texas' schedule. Texas, following their 2-game series against Ohio State, will be heading back home to Gregory Gymnasium to take on Minnesota on August 31st, a Wednesday. Then Texas will be heading down to Northern California to take on Stanford on September 4th. Then Texas heads back to Austin for a 4-game homestand. They play UC Davis on September 7th, then Denver on September 9th. Those 2 games are on a Wednesday and Friday, respectively. Then they play Houston on September 15th, a Thursday, and then they follow up their non-conference play with a matchup against High Point on September 16th. So that is that for the non-conference schedule for Texas. Then they open up the Big 12 conference play on the road against Kansas on September 21st. And that's kind of an interesting game. Like, Kansas is, I wouldn't say they're not good, but I don't think they're on the level of Baylor and Texas. That said, Texas doesn't want to get a big head from this, because the first 4 games are really going to be one to watch for. Texas is going to be really tested, and then their next 4 conference games, or non-conference games, are kind of going to be a breather, which is something good to see if you're Texas. Texas then heads back home to Gregory Gymnasium to take on Oklahoma on Saturday, September 24th. Then Texas hits the road to Lubbock. I say hit the road loosely because they're not going far, as they play Texas Tech. And then Texas returns to Austin to play TCU on October 5th, a Wednesday. Then the 1 week after, Texas will be remaining at home to take on Kansas State. Now, that Kansas State game is kind of going to be a trap game. Why? Because 3 days after, Texas plays Baylor in Waco, and that could be a tough place to win at. And Kansas State is not that bad. Kansas State, I think, is kind of underrated when it comes to the Big 12 in terms of women's volleyball. Obviously, they have Aaliyah Carter, who I think is very underrated in my opinion. I think she doesn't get a whole lot of credit just because of her height. She's only 5'9", but she could really bounce when it comes to getting the kill. And honestly, I think it's going to be quite the fascinating matchup right there. Hence the word if, Texas doesn't be careful. Speaking of Baylor, Texas plays at Baylor on October 15th, which that's going to be a barn burner. Then on October 19th, a Wednesday, Texas plays at Iowa State. So what I saw from the Big 12 coaches preseason poll is that Iowa State is supposedly to be good this year. They're projected to finish third in the conference, but more on that later. And then on Saturday, October 22nd, Texas returns to Austin to take on West Virginia. That'll be the start of a 2-game homestand, as on Wednesday, October 22nd, or on October 26th, Texas plays Texas Tech. Then Texas hits the road for a 2-game homestand, starting on Friday, October 28th, when they play Kansas State in Manhattan. Then Texas heads down to Dallas-Fort Worth to take on TCU on November 2nd, a Wednesday. Then Texas plays Iowa State the following week, 1 week after, as they play Iowa State at home on November 9th. And then on November 12th, a Saturday, Texas heads down to Norman to take on Oklahoma. And then Texas has a big 2-game homestand starting on November 16th against Kansas, and then November 19th against Baylor. So those 2 games could, hence the word could, determine the Big 12 Conference Championship. Kansas I think, has some upside to them just because they had themselves a promising season last year. They came very much alive in that NCAA tournament as they knocked off Oregon and Creighton. And then Baylor obviously made it to they lost in the Sweet 16. Baylor was the number 5 seed, if I remember correctly, and then they wound up losing, which, that was a bummer. With all that talent, they couldn't pull it out against Minnesota. Anyway, Texas closes out its schedule, or regular season schedule, at West Virginia on November 23rd. So, looking at Texas' schedule overall, I think Texas can definitely win the Big 12. They were slated to finish first in the Big 12 conference poll as we veer toward some Big 12 conference talk in terms of women's volleyball. So, Texas is slated to finish first in the Big 12 as they garnered 8 first-place votes and they garnered 64 points overall. Baylor, which got 1 first-place vote, was slated to finish second, which is the 5th straight year Baylor has been selected to finish in the top 2 for the 5th straight year, as Baylor garnered 52 points. 3rd place and 4th place is so tight. Iowa State has 45 points, while Kansas has 44 points. Texas Tech is slated to finish 5th in the Big Ten Conference with 37 points. Kansas State is slated to finish 6th as they garnered 34 points. Then TCU had 17 points as they're picked to finish 7th. Then West Virginia is 8th as they only garnered 16 points. And then Oklahoma brings up the rear as they are slated to finish dead last as they only garnered 15 points. So that is that for the Big 12 Conference Volleyball talk. So for those that remember, the Big 12 had 7 teams, yes, 7 teams make it to the NCAA tournament. All eyes are pretty much on this conference just because this conference kind of did pretty well when it came to its conference beating each other up. Texas obviously made it all the way to the Elite 8. Baylor made it all the way to the Sweet 16. Kansas obviously made it to the Sweet 16 as well. Texas Tech kind of got bounced in the first round as well as Kansas State. And then Iowa State also made the tournament. And then same can be said for West Virginia. I want to say West Virginia was the one that made the NCAA tournament last year. So there's that right there. Either way, 7 teams from the Big 12 conference made the NCAA tournament, and that's quite impressive right there. I guess that is the power of the Power 5 schools, and it's quite impressive, honestly. So I'm looking forward to seeing what all those teams can do. And yes, West Virginia was the team that made it to the NCAA tournament. They were one of 7 teams to make it to the NCAA tournament. They lost to Illinois in the first round, so there was that right there. So that is that for the Big 12 Women's Volleyball Conference talk. So now we jump on into our final team that we get to discuss in terms of schedule breakdowns, and that is Louisville. So Louisville, they just released their schedule as they released it today, which, boy, once again, the timing of these schedule releases could not have been any better. It's like I went from possibly having an hour show to probably having a little over an hour show, which I think is quite funny if you ask me. But big shout to all these teams that released their schedules today. So Louisville hits the road to Vermilion in South Dakota for the South Dakota tournament. Louisville plays Northern Kentucky on Friday, August 26th, and then they play the host school, South Dakota, later on the day. Then Louisville plays Missouri to close out the North Dakota tournament. Then Louisville hits the road to Bowling Green to take on kind of a interstate rival, Western Kentucky. That Western Kentucky-Louisville matchup is very underrated. Non-Power 5 versus Power 5. I think it's going to be a fun little matchup right there. And I really think that there can be some fireworks with those two teams. Just because Western Kentucky is perennially good in the Conference USA, and they're taking on the number 1 seed from last year. So that's bold right there. So then Louisville, following its road trip, they return home to Louisville to take on San Diego in the Cardinal Classic. They play the Toreros on September 2nd, a Friday. Then on Sunday, September 4th, Louisville plays Ohio State. That's going to be a very fun matchup right there. I think Ohio State-Louisville is going to be very challenging, especially for San Diego. Like, Louisville-Ohio State is going to be extremely challenging. And overall, I think that Louisville just can't get caught up in that San Diego match. They can't underestimate the Toreros. I think despite losing a good chunk of their team to graduation, San Diego should be a team to watch for this season. And then Louisville has its Louisville Invitational as they'll remain at home as they play Purdue on September 9th. Boy, howdy, that's another big-time matchup right there. They go from playing a team from the Sweet 16 to playing a team that made the Elite 8, which is quite nice. So that's quite amazing right there. And then Louisville is also slated to play Xavier or Lipscomb. It's not set in stone, so I think it's going to be quite something. Now here's where Louisville's schedule, or its non-conference schedule, starts to get really tough. Louisville hits the road to Lexington to play interstate rival Kentucky on September 14th, a Wednesday. And then Louisville hits the road to Palo Alto to take on Stanford on September 17th, a Saturday. And that's going to be a perfect way to close out non-conference play. Because Louisville then opens up ACC play against the Florida schools starting on September 23rd, a Friday, against Miami. And then Louisville plays Florida State on September 25th, which is a Sunday. Then Louisville plays Clemson on September 30th, as they'll be playing the Tigers at home. And then on Sunday, October 2nd, Louisville plays Georgia Tech, which that's going to be a fireworks matchup right there. Considering, A, Georgia Tech does have the great arm of Julia Bergman. B, Georgia Tech made it to the Elite 8 last year. And C, Georgia Tech has been good for the most part. Ever since they got Julia Bergman and they had Mariana Brambilla, I think Georgia Tech has just been on a tear. And it's kind of been the Julia Bergman effect. She has just been absolutely phenomenal. And with her playing in the VNL, it's only going to make her sharper and stronger. So then after that, Louisville hits the road for a 2-game road trip as October 7th, Louisville plays at Boston College. Sorry about that. So then Louisville then closes out its road trip on October 9th against Louisville. Then Louisville has a 2-game homestand on October 14th against Virginia Tech. Then on October 16th, a Sunday, Louisville plays Wake Forest. Then Louisville has another 2-game road trip starting on October 21st when they play at Virginia. Then this is the big one. This is the big-time matchup. Louisville plays on October 23rd, a Sunday, at Pitt, which, boy howdy, that is basically barn burner material. You want to know what else is going to be barn burner material? Louisville playing Notre Dame on Wednesday, October 26th. So you're probably wondering, well, what's so special about that, Teran? It's Notre Dame. Simple. Louisville is playing at the KFC Yum Center, which is kind of the big-time gymnasium that Louisville should be playing at in terms of all of its sports, but is not playing because basketball and whatnot. Anyway, Louisville then closes out. Well, then they also have another home game against Duke on October 28th. Then they have 2 more home games as they welcome the other Northern California schools, North Carolina State on November 4th, and then North Carolina on November 6th. Louisville then hits the road for a 2-game road trip, starting off with a trip to the ATL as Louisville plays Georgia Tech on Friday, November 11th. Then Sunday, November 13th, Louisville plays at North Carolina. Then Louisville closes out its final 2 games, one at home against Pitt. Oof! They get Pitt twice. Yikes! That's big, though. And then Louisville closes out the season on the road in South Bend against Notre Dame. So that is Louisville's schedule right there. So I really think that Louisville is going to be challenged early and often because you look at the teams that they're facing. They're facing, as we take it from the top, a South Dakota team that made the NCAA tournament. Granted, the Summit League isn't as big as probably the Conference USA or the Big East or the West Coast Conference or the Big West, but it's still somewhat good. South Dakota has been perennially good. And then Western Kentucky is always a great team. They made it to the second round. Then San Diego, a team that made it to the NCAA tournament last year, lost in the first round to Rice. And then Ohio State, a team that made the Sweet 16. Purdue made the Elite 8. Kentucky made the round of 32. Stanford made the round of 32. That's a very challenging schedule. Granted, Kentucky is going to take a little bit of a step back, but Stanford, on the other hand, that's going to be a fun matchup right there, considering Stanford returns a good portion of its team from last year. I think they only lost 1 player, and that player didn't even start. So that Louisville's going to be tested on the road against Stanford. So overall, I think Louisville's got a challenging schedule. If they actually go undefeated in the regular season again, then hats off to this team because they lost quite a bit of players from last year. They lost Anna Stevenson to graduation, Tori Dixon. The list goes on and on in terms of its players that it lost, but it does have some good players that it returns as well. They return Claire Chowsey, Anna Stevenson. Tori Dilfer actually returns as well. She returns for her graduate season. Anna DeBeer returns. Aiko Jones returns. So overall, I think Danny Busboom Kelly's team is going to be quite ready, and I really think Louisville has what it takes to keep up with every team in the ACC. So that is that for Louisville's women's volleyball schedule release. So before we head on into the commercial break, we have ourselves some volleyball news inside the ACC, as this was actually released a little while ago. Well, not a little while ago, but it was released quite a bit earlier in the day, as Syracuse has hired a new head coach. They hired, I hope I'm not mispronouncing this, Bakeer Ganesharatnam, their new head coach of Syracuse. So Syracuse has hired Bakeer Ganesharatnam as their new head coach. Bakeer, because I'm not even going to bother to try to pronounce that bear of a last name. Bakeer was the former coach at Temple, as he led Temple to some success. He won over 170 games, as he went 173 and 144 in 11 seasons at Temple before he stepped down. And ACC Volleyball Talk kind of mentioned this on Twitter. This hire is a bit of an interesting hire, if you ask me, because Colin Yellen actually just retired, as he retired quite a little inconveniently, just because it's 2 more months till season. If he had retired when NCAA men's volleyball season / beach volleyball season was happening, it's a little bit more understandable, but 2 months before season is kind of head-scratching. And then also, Bakeer's going to have quite a little bit to work with when it comes to Syracuse, as they only returned 6 players from last year, and again, 8 weeks until season starts. So if Bakeer Ganesharatnam does make the NCAA tournament with this Syracuse team, a team that has only 6 returning players, and a team that has to play in a conference that consists of Pitt, Louisville, Florida State, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Miami, and all those other talented teams, then this guy deserves Coach of the Year. That's just my take, but I wish him the best of luck. I wish Bakeer Ganesharatnam nothing but the best with Syracuse, and I wish nothing but the best for Colin Yellen as he enters retirement. So that is that for the NCAA women's volleyball news. Let's take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we have quite a bit to go over, as we have the VNL on the men's side, as the U.S. did not do as great as we all thought we would see them do. And then also we have some beach volleyball to discuss, as Megan Kraft continues to do well on the pro beach volleyball level. And also we have a little bit of a discussion of the Denver Open, the AVP's next event. So you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball, from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of IE Sports Radio shows, such as Reppin' to NorCal Sports with Gina G, who is Set Point's biggest supporter. And we also have the Show That Never Sleeps podcast with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss. And we also have Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick, who comes on 1 hour before Set Point goes live. So definitely do check out Adam and Chi-Town Weekly. And without any further delay, let's get on into segment number 2 of Set Point. Let's jump on into some VNL action, as it wasn't a real promising week for the U.S. It started off promising, as USA, the Team USA was 4-0 to start the week, and they were able to kick off the week as they took down Serbia in 4 sets. They won the first set 26-24, lost the second set 25-23, won the third set 25-23, and then they won the fourth set 25-20. And it was quite the big way to start off the season, and it was overall a solid win for the U.S. as they played Iran, which at the time was 11th in the standings. Gina says, "Thank you so much. Tomorrow will be a great show," as she's going to brag about the Warriors Championship on Reppin' to NorCal Sports. Yes, definitely do check out Reppin' to NorCal Sports, and definitely do check out Gina G's show. So, back to the U.S. So, they're 5-0, taking on an Iran team that is 11th in the standings. Everyone is probably thinking the U.S. is going to mow their way down to victory against Iran, right? Well, they weren't the ones that did the mowing. Iran actually swept the U.S. 25-18, 29-27, and 27-25. Now, in the match against Iran, I was told that Iran did have a collision, and that kind of stopped the momentum, as that kind of sucked a little of the momentum out of the U.S.'s sails. But it's still no excuse, because I don't know how you go from 5-0, looking very promising, and number 1, to losing to the 11th best team in the standings. Now, granted, the VNL is any given day. I really think that the U.S. maybe let their guard down, but it wasn't all that bad. But at the time, it wasn't looking like it was going to be too bad. But you're going to find out that it gets worse. So, the U.S. got swept by Iran. The following match, the U.S. took on Bulgaria and won that one in 4 sets. The match actually featured 4 Long Beach State men's volleyball players, past and present. On the U.S., it featured T.J. DeFalco, who graduated in 2019, Kyle Ensing, who also graduated along with DeFalco in 2019, and Josh Tuaniga, who graduated in 2019 along with DeFalco and Tuaniga. On the other side, in Bulgaria, you have Alex Nikolov, who was named the National Player of the Year and the National Freshman of the Year. And overall, Alex Nikolov was just a freaking howitzer when it comes to his arm. So he was doing all that he can to try to lead Bulgaria, but the U.S. was just too much. The U.S. won the first set 25-12, then lost the second set 25-20 despite a late surge. Then they won the second set 26-24, and then won the fourth set 25-23, giving them the bounce-back victory. If you were a Long Beach State men's volleyball fan, then boy howdy, you were probably enjoying this match. All that was missing was Mason Briggs, who unfortunately was not on the roster at the time. So it's a bummer, but it is what it is. And then the U.S. closed out its week by playing Poland yesterday. So Poland and USA, along with France, were tied for first place in the VNL standings. However, in the end, only one, if not two teams, would advance to remaining atop the standings. And that actually wound up being Poland, as the U.S. won the first set 25-21. Then they lost the second set 25-23, which the U.S. actually was up 17-13 and disappointingly lost that lead. And then the third set, the U.S. had set point. And then, unfortunately for them, Poland scored the next 3 points to take the set 26-24. And then the fourth set, Poland won it 25-22, as that basically dealt the U.S. their second loss. And that loss kind of hurt them in the standings, because keep in mind, you got to remember, the U.S. entered the week atop the standings at 4-0. A 2-2 record later, the U.S. is now dropped to 5th in the VNL standings, which, that's kind of frustrating. Well, it's not frustrating, but it's kind of disappointing, just because the U.S. had themselves quite a great week last week. The first week, as they outlasted Japan in 5 sets. They took down number 1 Brazil in 4 sets. It's like, how do you go from that impressive week, and then you just lay a big goose egg for the most part? Like, even in their wins, they didn't look all that great. Like, the wins against Bulgaria and Serbia, they didn't look like themselves. And then, obviously, the one against Iran, they left so many opportunities on the table. So, overall, the U.S. has to kind of do some soul-searching, and they kind of have to check their roster to see what the perfect roster is and who has been excelling, and then who kind of needs to be on the reserves. I'm not trying to say that players did not do a good job, but overall, there kind of has to be some sort of like modifications, because this week is kind of unacceptable. The team that's atop the standings in the VNL is France at 7-1, and then Poland's right behind them at 7-1. Both teams have 21 points. However, Poland has lost 1 set more than France has. Italy and Japan are both 6-2 along with the U.S. So the U.S. is tied for third with Italy and Japan. However, Italy has 19 points, Japan has 18 points, and the U.S. has only 17 points. Brazil is right behind them along with Netherlands, as both teams are 5-3. However, Brazil has 15 points, Netherlands has 14 points, and then Iran is chilling with Serbia at 4-4. Iran has 12 points while Serbia has 11 points. I honestly could still see the U.S. making the knockout round, which is basically the playoffs. However, if they play like this next week, then the U.S. is not going to be in for an easy ride. Like, honestly, they cannot have another week like this again. Otherwise, heaven knows they won't have a good seeding, or they could be on the outside looking in. Nothing would be worse for the U.S. to miss the knockout round after a great 4-0 start, which once again included a 5-set win over a scrappy Japan team, and then a 4-set win over then number 1 Brazil. Andrew Hagenbaugh, thank you for popping into the chat room. He says, what's going on, Teran? And then he says, is this the Volleyball World Cup? It's the VNL, the Volleyball Nations League. It's kind of like a World Cup. It's basically teams from all over the country, like the U.S., Canada, France, Argentina, Brazil, you name it. So it's kind of sort of like a World Cup, as the VNL basically just takes those teams and just pits them together, and eventually they play in a little bit of a knockout round. The top 8 teams advance to the knockout round, and then they basically duke it out for who is the last team standing. So to answer your question, yes, this is a Volleyball World Cup. So yeah, it is a Volleyball World Cup, and that's basically what the VNL is. So the U.S. will have to do some soul searching as they have the week off this week, and then they are back at it on Monday, July 4th, the 4th of July, when they play Germany, and then they play France, which couple days after, and boy howdy, that France matchup is going to be a pain in the neck. And then Friday, July 8th, the U.S. plays Canada, and then the U.S. closes out, I want to say, pool play or round-robin play against Argentina, as that'll basically conclude the round-robin play. So looking at the U.S.'s matches, Germany sits at 11th in the standings. Unless the U.S. basically underestimates Germany like they did with Iran, the U.S. should be fine. Now, the France matchup is going to be a whole different story. France is going to be guns a-blazing, and they are not going to pull any punches against the U.S. The Canada matchup, I think the U.S. should be able to handle that nicely because Canada is near the bottom of the standings. They're 2-6. And then closing out round-robin play, the U.S. against Argentina. Argentina is near the bottom of the standings. They're 2-6. So the U.S. needs to strike while the iron is hot. They need to at least win 2 out of their 4 matches. I definitely could see them winning 3. The France matchup could be a rough ride, but if they win at least 2, they should be a lock for the top 8. If not, then this could be as worse as the LA Galaxy being in the top 7 all season long, and then on the final day of the MLS season, they get left out of the playoffs because playoff scenarios happen. But I digress. So, once again, the U.S. is going to have to do some soul searching. I definitely think they have the potential to go deep. They have a very good head coach in John Sprott, and they have quite a good number of teams, or they have a good number of players on this team, and they have great players such as DeFalco, Ensing, Aaron Russell, just to name a few. I really think the U.S. just had themselves a bad week, and that's not good. They cannot have another bad week like that ever again. Like, it just can't happen. They're way too good to be having a bad week like that. So we'll see what happens with the U.S. going forward when it comes to their last week of VNL play. This week the women are back at it, and the U.S. women's team is currently chilling in second place at 7-1 with 21 points. The U.S. this week, which is actually the last week of play, they play Belgium on Wednesday, and then they play Serbia on Thursday, and then they play Turkey on Saturday, and then Germany on Sunday. So, looking at the U.S. women's matches, so Belgium is 12th in the standings. They're pretty much near the bottom of the standings. They only have 6 points. Oof. And they are tied for the Dominican Republic and Canada for 10th place. So they should be able to handle Belgium easily, but they just can't underestimate them. And then Serbia, on the other hand, Serbia is 7th, which is kind of a bit of a jump from playing Belgium. Honestly, the Serbia matchup could give the U.S. problems, especially since Serbia wants to fight for its positioning to finish in the top 8. If Serbia does win that matchup against the U.S., that pretty much is nearly a lock for them to make the top 8, especially with a great win like that. And then against Turkey is another jump from Serbia, as Turkey is also 5-3. They also will be fighting for a spot in the top 8. The U.S., once again, cannot underestimate Turkey. Turkey actually has a good team. If most of that Turkey team from the Olympics returns onto that roster, I really think the U.S. could have their hands full just because that Turkey team is scrappy. I saw that Turkey team from the Olympics when they played the U.S. Boy, howdy, it was just a freaking whirlwind of emotions. The U.S. went up 2-0 in that match. Turkey wound up winning the next 2 sets, and then the U.S. managed to win the 5th set kind of convincingly. So for the U.S., they just can't underestimate Turkey, and Turkey has some athletes, in my opinion. They have some studs on that team. And with their top 8 hopes on the line, they really have to strike while the iron is hot. And then the last matchup is against Germany, which the U.S. should be able to handle Germany. Germany is near the bottom of the standings. They're 13th entering this week. So the U.S. women's team, they're pretty much in control of their destiny. They're pretty much a lock to finish in the top 8. Depending on what happens with Japan and possibly Brazil and Italy, depends on what their seeding will be. Looking at Japan this week, they play the Netherlands, which, looking at the Netherlands are not that good. They are near the bottom. They are 15th in the standings. They only have 1 win, which is a big fat oof. Then Japan plays Turkey. I already talked about how good Turkey can be. Then Japan plays Serbia, which is kind of a downgrade, a little bit of a downgrade from Turkey. And then Japan closes out the round-robin play against Belgium. So overall, Japan is in control of its destiny. They have the head-to-head over the U.S., It's just all about if they finish with more points than the U.S. Because that 3-set loss is starting to loom a little large for the U.S. as that's kind of what's preventing the U.S. from overtaking Japan in the standings. So for the U.S., all that they need to do is focus on their side. Like, if they lock up the number 2 seed, then honestly, they should rest their players. Honestly, I really think it would be a good idea just to not risk any of their top players getting hurt and to give like the newcomers some playing time. I really don't want to see any U.S. fans just freaking out and being like, why did the U.S. lose? Simple, because they rested a bunch of their players. Don't you know what load management is? Anyway, so for the U.S., they're in control of finishing in the top 8. They should basically be a lock. Like, comparing the U.S. to Thailand, they have 9 points. They are 9 points ahead, and Thailand is 4-4. I don't see any formula of how the U.S. finds a way to whittle their way out of the top 8. The only way that happens is if any of the U.S.'s wins get rescinded and they get knocked out of the top 8 and whatnot. So there's that for the U.S., and honestly, they should be able to be in contention for finishing in the top 8, and I really like their chances of getting the top 2 seeds. My thing is, they could face Brazil, and when it comes to U.S. versus Brazil in women's volleyball, all bets are off. Yes, the U.S. was able to sweep Brazil in the first matchup, or the first and only round-robin matchup. However, you never know what could happen in the second meeting just because Brazil always is a good team, and they do have the strong arm of Julia Bergman, who is a freaking cannon when it comes to volleyball, as she is just a beast for Georgia Tech. It's going to be interesting to see what she can do. And then Brazil this week plays China, which China is 6th in the standings, which that could actually prove to be something huge, just because China is not too far from Brazil. They're only 2 points back, and China is 5-3, so that could be rather something. And then South Korea, South Korea is at the bottom. I don't mean to say it like that, but South Korea should not be able to challenge Brazil. And then Brazil versus Bulgaria. Bulgaria is also near the bottom. It's like, good gracious. And then Thailand, I just mentioned, they're basically borderline of number 8. They're basically they're basically hit or miss when it comes to making the top 8. And right behind Thailand is Poland and the Dominican Republic, as well as Canada. So those are kind of those hopefuls of trying to make the top 8. So that's that for Brazil's schedule. Looking at Italy's schedule, I didn't mean to say it like that. So Italy plays Poland, which Poland, once again, hopeful to make the top 8. And then following the Poland match, Italy plays South Korea, which is at the bottom. Then Italy plays Bulgaria, then Thailand. So Italy, unless, of course, they have an off game, they should basically lock up a top 4 spot. And who knows, maybe if, hence the word if, fate rests in their favor, Italy could jump Brazil in the standings, but they shouldn't be all that worried. What they should be worried about is their quarterfinal matchup. So if the knockout round started today, Japan would play Thailand, US would play Serbia, Brazil would play China, which I think that would be a barn burner, and then Italy would play Turkey, which would also be a barn burner. So overall, that is kind of how the US VNL women's volleyball standings look like. And honestly, this week basically decides it all. This week decides the top 8 and who goes and who gets left behind. And seeding is going to be so key right there. It's going to be so crucial. So that is that for the VNL when it comes to the women's preview and the men's recap. I'm looking forward to what the women can do this week. So let's jump on over to some beach volleyball. So unfortunately, the AVP has not released the schedule for the Denver Open. All I can tell you is that the on-site qualifier is July 1st. And then the main draw, day 1, is Saturday, July 2nd. And then the main draw, day 2, is July 3rd. Other than that, we don't know who's participating, which makes me sad. I wish I could give some insight on who's playing and who is participating and who isn't, which thanks AVP. It does not help that set point is on a Monday, which is well too early in advance for the AVP, but either way, it's no big deal. I'll survive. It's the AVP. I'll provide updates somehow, some way, even though I am working, which is not going to be fun times for me, but what can you do? So that is that for the AVP right there. So before we get on out of here, I do have to talk about a beach volleyball player who is having loads of success, and that just so happens to be Megan Kraft. So Megan Kraft, for those of you that know who she is a darn good volleyball player, and she definitely is. She is a USC women's volleyball player. She is a 2-time national champion. She won her freshman year, and then she won her sophomore year. And there's more to meet the eye when it comes to this girl. She recently partnered up with Emily Stockman, and they eventually won a pro beach volleyball tournament, which that's quite impressive. I'm looking up to see the exact name of what the tournament was, as Megan Kraft and Emily Stockman won the Bialystok Futures Tournament with a 3-set win in the final. And honestly, it's the second straight tournament that Megan Kraft has won. The first one that she won was the previous week, as Megan Kraft teamed up with Savvy Simo to win gold in Turkey in the Balıkesir Futures Tournament. So Megan Kraft is only 19 years old. That's the scary thing about Megan Kraft. She's only 19 years old, and she's winning pro tournaments with 2 different partners. One with Savvy Simo, which was the Turkey one, and then the other being the Bialystok. So, and then you also got to throw in that she's a 2-time national champion as well with USC. But she has been doing this ever since she was 16. She has just been killing it on the pro beach volleyball scene ever since. By age 16, she had not only made the 2 AVP main draws, but she finished 5th in one. Keep in mind, at age 16, still in high school, Megan Kraft was playing in the AVP, and she finished 5th in one of the AVP's events. Lord have mercy. By age 17, Megan Kraft was competing for medals on the World Tour, falling in a bronze medal match in Guam to Japan's Suzuka Hashimoto and Ayumi Shiratori. That's still impressive. Making top 4 semifinals, that is very impressive. So for Megan Kraft to do that is quite amazing. By age 18, here's where the accolades start to pile up. By age 18, she piled up a laundry list of NCAA accolades, which included First Team All-American, Freshman of the Year, Pac-12 Pair of the Year, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, NCAA Championship All-Tournament Team, as well as NCAA Champion. And she even got to partner along Olympian Tina Gradina, who was just killing it in the pro beach volleyball scene. And she played defense, and Megan Kraft played defense, and she blocked well, and she didn't even wilt at any point when it came to playing with Tina Gradina. So now we jump on over to the present. Megan Kraft is another NCAA tournament champion. She's won 2 pro beach volleyball tournaments, and the sky's the limit for her. She's only 19, and she is basically going to do lots of great things. I don't want to put her on a pedestal just yet, just because a lot can happen, and she is definitely a hopeful for making it to the Paris Olympics. It's the next set of Olympics, but either way, only 19 years old, a world champion, an AVP main draw player, and it's just flat out amazing. And she also finished 3rd in the AVP New Orleans event with Emily Stockman. And yes, she is preparing to make a run for the Paris Olympic Games with Emily Stockman. So overall, I really think that Megan Kraft has a huge and bright future ahead of her. And who knows, maybe she could, hence the word could, be as big as, I don't want to say this too early, but she could be as big as April Ross or Alex Kleinman. I'm not going to go that too far. I mean, she has that potential, though, but I just think that Megan Kraft is just piling up so many accolades, and she's still only in college. That's the amazing thing. And she's been just doing this whole big thing ever since she was in high school, and she even got to play indoor as well. She had to juggle indoor as well. And then after indoor volleyball play, where she played at Torrey Pines, she just ran with it when it came to the beach volleyball scene, and she has just killed it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Megan Kraft can do going forward. And that is going to do it for my little story time discussion about Megan Kraft and how she is just killing it in the pro beach volleyball scene. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Without any further delay, let's drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I hope you all have an amazing day. I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you to Andrew Hagenbaugh, Davidson Crooks, and Adam Karnick for tuning in. I really do appreciate y'all popping in the chat room. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen in the wee hours of the morning, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. I will be back Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Next week is the 4th of July, and honestly, I don't know what's going to be of Set Point next week. I don't know if we'll be going live on Sunday. I don't know if we'll be maybe going live at 5 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. I do not know what Set Point schedule is going to be on the 4th of July. It's going to be quite interesting. But either way, there will be Set Point next week. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. Be safe, everybody. Be a kind person. Don't be a dum-dum. Wear your sunscreen. Do good in this world. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!